Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the public board meeting of the Care Quality Commission. For those watching on record, it's the 29th of November 2023 at 1:30 p.m. And welcome, colleagues, to the meeting. A few opening observations for me before we get into the main business. One of our directors is unable to be with us in the room. Belinda Black, one of our non-executive directors, but is joining us on the screen. So I believe it will be visible to those watching virtually. So welcome, Belinda. And we are joined by Ellie Kemp over there, our network representative from the Carers Equality Network. So welcome. The only apology is from Sean Kelly. He remains unwell, so isn't able to join us today, but delighted Prem, one of his colleagues, joining us in the corner there. It's a relatively short agenda, shorter than usual. If you recall, last time we started late, and I said that wouldn't repeat, so it hasn't. We're back to normal times, but it's a fairly short agenda. That is partly because one or two things we had planned, people aren't available again through illness, unfortunately. So we'll catch up later. But we've taken the opportunity to make a slight change to the agenda. And although not here, we are going to be joined by Sandy Lewis later on in about an hour or so's time. Sandy is the Associate Director responsible for the new maternity group that has joined us. She can only join for about 10 minutes, but it's an opportunity to meet board colleagues and for board colleagues to hear a little bit more about what she does or her unit does ahead of a more substantive discussion at a later time. So for any of you watching this and interested in timing, it will mean we'll run on slightly, hopefully no more than 15 minutes to the allotted time. It may be less than that. And what I'm proposing to do is to bring her in after the corporate performance update, so that will probably be about 2:30, and then we'll take the comfort break at that stage and cover the annual health and safety report after the break. So slight shift, and it means that instead of finishing around about 3:30, we might be a few minutes later, if that's okay. I believe one of our colleagues around the table may have to dash slightly before that, but quite understand if that's the case. So, thank you, everybody. Can I check if there are any new conflicts of interest? No observed, thank you. I haven't been notified of any other urgent business you'd like us to cover. That's not on the agenda, other than Sandy Lewis joining us. So, okay. Thank you very much. So, Ian, I think I'll just hand straight over to you for your report. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to do what I normally do and take both this paper and the next paper together, both the organisational matters and the regulatory matters together. I think it'd be fair to say it's been a pretty busy time period since we were last together. In terms of director appointments, I'm really pleased to report the appointment of 3 new directors. Jackie Jackson as Director of People, Nicola Wise looking after secondary care, and Rebecca Bowers looking after learning disability and autism. All three of those directors are internal promotees, which I think I'm really pleased about. I think it makes a really positive statement about the ability to achieve internal promotion, and of course that will open up opportunities for people to move in their respective areas as well. In terms of the listening, learning and responding to concerns review, this is a very important piece of work and remains an important piece of work. Work continues to respond with 2 important steps having been achieved this last reporting period. We delivered part 1 of a 2-part course on improving leadership confidence in relation to race, racism and structural racism, and board colleagues will be part of the next phase of that. And the second thing that we achieved here is we set up a new executive team subcommittee to help ensure that the actions in the report remain prominent and are embedded in our wider work. You remember when we talked about the LLRC report, we talked about not wanting to create a completely separate set of activities. We wanted, as far as possible, to embed it in those activities which were already running, but there was a need for coordination, and the new subcommittee helps us with that. I think probably the biggest thing we've achieved, though, in the last reporting period is our go live of our assessment service, which is referred to internally as Go Live 3.0. It has undoubtedly been the main operational focus for this month, but arguably for a number of months now. It means that the single assessment framework that we've been trailing for a while now is now live. That went live a week ago on the 21st of November in some parts of the South network. We have a plan to go live as a series of relatively small steps over the next 4 months. And this is a massive milestone for us as an organisation, both organisationally, methodologically, and technically. This is the last phase of replacing a very significant part of our technical architecture. And this will enable us to be, I think, much more efficient in the way that we do our work, much more targeted, and alongside being able to use significantly more sophisticated data. And that will in turn help providers to benchmark their own performance, but it will also ultimately improve the service to the public. I think when we talk about the new assessment framework, I think there is an important part of it which is about efficiency and productivity internally. But I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the ability that it's going to give providers to improve the quality of services that they deliver, and in turn delivers a big uptick in quality for the public. I wanted just to take this opportunity in public, though, to formally record my thanks to all of our colleagues who've worked so hard to get us here. This has truly been a fantastic team effort. I'm particularly grateful for the support and leadership of my executive team colleagues who are sitting around this table, as well as the support we've had from a number of non-exec colleagues over a number of years. And I think the colleagues have shown enormous professionalism and resilience to get us to this point, and deliver what is a fundamental evolution in the way that we do our work. And I know other colleagues around the table will want to chip in and talk about the experience of the last week and how people are feeling in a second. But before I do that, I just want to just move on to the regulatory insights component. Alongside the obvious big focus on Go Live with the new methodology, we've of course been looking to make sure that we are continuing to operate the old methodology as well, and so that's an important part of our plan for the winter. What that's meant is that we're doing a number of things. We're doing a piece of work around responsive assessments in general practice, looking at how they're coping with demand, looking for examples of good practice. We're completing our maternity inspection program, which we've been talking about for a while now. We expect that to be complete in the very early part of 2024, and we'll issue a report at that point, which summarises the good practice as well as some of the challenges. And we're refreshing our patient-first approach, which our colleague Prem Pramadakan, who's now our acting medical director, helped bring together with emergency department practitioners, and we'll be refreshing that as part of this winter's approach as well. Our local authority assessments, we've now published 5 pilot reports, and we're agreeing the next steps with colleagues at the Department of Health and Social Care, ready for wider rollout next year. And in terms of our integrated care system work, the field work is now complete, and we're now working on the first of 2, the first and second reports. And we have had confirmation from the Department of Health and Social Care that they do not want us to rate this first tranche. So that's quite an important point about rating this first tranche. We'll be writing the reports, but not rating. And of course, alongside that, we've also launched our fees consultation for paying fees around ICS work. We've also, I think importantly, agreed to take on the lead on independent care and treatment reviews for the next 2 years. You remember some time ago, there was a real concern about people being effectively stuck in inpatient acute mental health settings, and this idea of independent care and treatment reviews meant that the people's individual cases were reviewed with a view to helping manage their way out of an acute setting. We're discussing, the details of this are being discussed with NHS England and the Department of Health and Social Care, but we hope to be able to make a real difference to the lives of some incredibly vulnerable people who are currently detained in mental health settings. And finally, our MNSI colleagues have joined us. They're continuing to settle in well, and as Ian was describing at the top of the meeting, Sandy Lewis will be joining us later on to give us some direct feedback on how she's found the last month or so. So Ian, I was just going to pause there, and I know one or two other colleagues are looking to come in and just talk about the experiences of Go Live 3.0 as well.
Yeah, I think we probably will record some comments from the board back to what you're doing. But Tyson, do you wish to expand on how you see it going?
Thank you, Ian. And can I reinforce Ian's thanks to colleagues for the way they have approached our Go Live a couple of weeks ago. I'm really proud of the really professional way that they have adapted to the new ways of working in the South, and I'm particularly grateful to those colleagues who have been very closely involved in our transformation, helping the senior team, helping teams all over the CQC. And I'd like to give a call out in particular to our super users and our change champions, who I think have been really influential in the way that we've been able to do this. And I know Ellie sat next to me has been a super user, and we've run a number of engagement events, launch events over the country. I think we've run 10 up to now. There are 3 more to go. There's been executive team presence at all of those events, and I think that the mood I would describe as really purposeful. People, I think, are now focused on the future, which is now very close by, and the discussions have been very detailed and exactly the level that you would hope to at this point in time. So I'm glad that the launch of the 3.1 has gone well, but I'm very grateful to my colleagues for bringing us to where we are today, but also the purpose they're showing at the moment.
Kate, do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to echo Ian and Tyson's comments. This has been the most epic cross-organisational effort from every part of our business to get to where we are now. And this is really exciting. This is real and live now, our new assessment framework enabling us to regulate more effectively through the eyes of people who use services. So this is a really big day. Last week was a really big day for us. So I want to thank all the colleagues who have helped get us here. But also I want to emphasise Tyson's point. It's our operational colleagues who have taken this and are working with this and making this happen. So from where I sit, I thank all of my people who have been working on this with other colleagues to deliver this new module. But a big thank you to our operations teams who are bringing this to life, and that's where we're going to see it starting to make a difference for people who use services and providers.
Thanks, Kate. I mean, this is a major change to the way of working, but it's enabled or underpinned by some pretty fundamental technology. So again, Mark, I don't know if you want to add. Chris, I'll come to you in a moment.
Thank you. So just a few words on the technology side, because this is momentous from a technology perspective. So we've implemented our new underpinning regulatory platform. The assessment release that went out last week followed successful releases on contact and on notifications for providers, and it's this is the underpinning technology that allows our assessors and inspectors to be able to essentially manage the way in which we record information and evidence against the new quality statements for our new single assessment framework. That leads to efficiencies in the ways of working, a better, more transparent service for providers to help providers improve, and it will be the mechanism that enables us to publish our ratings in a way that allows us to have more up-to-date ratings, and underpins our strategic objective to become a smarter regulator. As colleagues have said already, I wanted to add my thanks to not just the inspectors and assessors and operational colleagues who've worked really hard to make this a success, but also all the programme team who've worked incredibly hard, and we've had people working ridiculous hours and weekends and evenings and really going above and beyond to get us to the situation that we are now. So really thankful for everybody's huge effort to deliver what we have done now. This is obviously the part of a phased rollout, so we've had a number of colleagues in a number of integrated teams across the South network use the new technology. The successful launch paves the way for us to be able to continue with that rollout as we look to roll out in other regions and extend the rollout in the South. The technology is quite a leap from where we've been before, so this is going to enable us to have new capabilities about understanding how we work and how we manage our work and the different stages at which we manage our work across that assessment journey, and pulling in that information about contact and information of concern and notifications as well to enable us with that consistent way of working. And the flexibility of the tool enables us to react to the best way in which we can continuously improve our operational way of working. We've got, as I said, a number of users that are live in the last week. We've got another few hundred that are teeing up to get live in the next coming weeks, and that will continue to roll out over the course of the next few months. That also applies to our providers, so we've got some 20-odd providers that are now signed up to the portal, and several hundred others in the stage of coming on board in the next few weeks. Then overall, I think it's a great platform to enable us to move on. It will enable us to move on to develop subsequent capabilities that are in the pipeline around registration and enforcement, and it will get to that position where we've got a complete end-to-end smarter regulation system. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Chris, you wanted to comment, and then I'll open it up to questions from people.
Just to build on what's already been said, I'd also like to thank the provider community who've helped us with the early adoption of this new approach. It is obviously a change for, as well as colleagues internally, it's a change for them as well. And both provider groups, provider organisations, and people who use services have been involved in the development of this new approach. I particularly like to call out the group of providers who are early adopters in the South region. They've really helped, I think, frame how we're doing this work to make sure that both as the technology works, but also that it drives the right understanding, the right behaviour. As Mark said, this isn't just about the technology, but it does mean that we're more able to gather information from providers more efficiently and effectively, and use that information to drive not just an understanding of how individual providers are performing, but it also gives us an opportunity to look across local areas and look between providers about how services are working for people, and that's how people experience care. They experience services across a local area. So I'm very grateful for the provider community and people who use services for their involvement in this work. I very much hope that as we develop the use of this technology, it will help us not only with our assessment of organisations, but our assessment across local areas.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, a lot of a good report of a number of things. I mean, let's deal with any questions first on the transformation, and then we'll take any other questions on any other aspects of the reports. But any observations or questions on the transformation? I mean, if my colleagues don't, I know I'm speaking on behalf of colleagues as we were chatting earlier, but those of us who display grey hairs also have been around long enough to have the scars on our back when these things go wrong. And I know it's early days and we've still got lots of stuff to deliver, but I mean, I think the collective sigh of relief when it all worked was probably visible or audible on the other side of London, but as everyone said, and I'll just echo it, great thanks to the executive team, but also I know everyone else. You said, Mark, referred to the hours that people have been working. We shouldn't forget how hard a lot of people have worked to get this delivered. So I think to get us to launch on the revised timetable, but on the timetable we set, and with things working pretty much, is congratulations to all of you. So we should formally know that, and thanks to anyone that's listening. That's the transformation, so thank you. Great start on such a high note, but obviously we'll be keeping progress on the rollout under review. Then questions, anything else? So Christine.
Thank you. Yes, it's on regulatory insights. Two questions. First one is the local authority assessments. I've had a chance to dip into them, if not read them in depth. And I just wanted to find out how the issue of fair cost of care has been treated, because I couldn't quite see it when I was looking. And then just to pick up on Ian's point about ICS ratings or not having ratings, you mentioned that's the first tranche. Is it just the first tranche, or is that going to be something permanent?
Thank you, Christine, for the question. On the local authority assessment side of it, so we're very pleased to have published the reports. And the approach we've taken, obviously this is using the new SAF and the 9 quality statements. The approach we took to these first 5 reports has been to identify, as it were, the highs and the lows of what we've found, and to support the judgments that we've made around the quality statements and then the overall indicative rating. On the question of commissioning and the fair cost of care, so that is part of the evidence bank that we collect. So from the authorities, we've collected the market position statements and the market sustainability plans, and had a discussion as part of the field work about commissioning intentions, strategic intentions, and the impact of those on sufficiency. It's fair to say that in some reports it's featured more than others as a high or a low in the way that we've structured the report. But going forwards, we are looking at both changes to the way that we do the self-assessment for authorities to bring in some more consistent information, and also that we're looking at the reporting to see whether we might be more explicit to focus on the issue of commissioning. But we've certainly looked at the issue and underpinned that in the ratings and eventually in the scoring and eventually the rating that we've given those authorities. And then on the question of the ICS rating, so that's for the pilot period, so we've not got a final position from the department on that. We expect to have that conversation. The reason for that is mainly because we will be testing the scoring approach in the way that we do the ICSs, and that will then lead us to a conversation about how well does that translate to a rating. Important difference between ICSs and local authorities. For the local authorities, we have the CARE Act to test against. For ICSs, we don't have regulations in the same way, and so we are taking, as it were, a step-by-step and a cautious approach to that, guided by the policy of the department.
Anything else, Christine?
Just really to say that on the local authority assessments, it seems to me that fair cost of care has a major impact on quality of care delivery. So it does seem important to me that it is actually covered.
Any other questions or comments from people? I just, okay, so I had one observation and one question. The observation is just to emphasise, we talked about the new executive committee that will oversee progressing the LLRC. I think it's important to note that, as I understand it, James, that committee is chaired by you. So we do have a member of the executive team being accountable for delivery, which I think is extremely helpful and a point worth noting. My question is really to do with the maternity work. I mean, not just because of our work, but including because of our work. Clearly, maternity and concerns on the quality is probably one of the biggest issues being debated about the NHS at the moment. I just wondered if someone could say a little bit more about the timing of the report and the extent to which we might be able to comment on, firstly, why the ratings appear to be going down, but secondly, the good practice and what we could do to assist or support improvement where we found very good practice. And I mean, there have been some maternity units that are going up. The media tends to comment only on the ones going down, but there have been some going the other way. So I'd just be interested to know a little bit more about timing and likely content of that report.
Thank you, Chair. So as we talked about in State of Care, we are almost at the end of a programme of re-inspecting and re-rating every maternity setting in the country since the pandemic. And as we talked about in State of Care, and the media that followed showed a notable increase in the number of maternity services that were requires improvement or inadequate. There are some themes in those inspections that we found as we went to each of the services. The main theme was people not listening to women and their families about what their experiences were. There was a theme around a lack of oversight from boards around the work on the maternity settings and governance. So we are calling these out in every instance. Every time we go to a maternity setting where we have concerns, we address it immediately with the provider and in some instances with NHS England. And we are on track to publish a kind of thematic piece once we've concluded all the maternity inspections that will draw out in more detail those themes where we are finding where things aren't working right. But also, as you say, we have found some examples of good practice. And again, we will, as we did with State of Care, we look forward to shining a light on that as well in our summary report.
Okay, thanks, Kate. I don't see any other hands up. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Ian, and your team. And once again, well done on the transformation. Stage 1 would be great. Right, shall we move on? We have a quarterly assurance report on people, so I think Jackie Jackson will be joining us, is that correct?
Sure.
So I'll start introing it, if that's okay, as Jackie's making her way to her seat. Colleagues, this is our quarterly report that we provide to board around our people insights and our people data. The pack that's attached to the paper continues to get fuller, but hopefully provides useful insights to the board about what's going on in our organisation. You'll notice the pack follows a kind of life cycle of an employee's experience, so how we are recruiting and onboarding people and what we know about the makeup of the groups of colleagues we are recruiting, how we are rewarding colleagues, so a bit of information about how we give out our kind of reward and recognition vouchers, or we talk about sickness, absence, and again themes around that, and then we look at people exiting the organisation and their reasons for it. In the summary paper, we highlight some of the things we feel quite proud about as a team that we're doing around diversity inclusion, and we've talked here before at board around things like our inclusive leadership pathway. That is a thoroughly enjoyable programme to be a part of, that I am and many other colleagues are as well. So I'll hand over to Jackie just to draw out any highlights, and then between Jackie and I, we're happy to take any comments or questions from colleagues.
Jackie, welcome.
The red, yes. Thanks, thank you. Okay, there's a couple of points I just want to add into the paper, which I'm particularly proud of. We often get questions around our recruitment and how attractive we are as an employer. The latest round of the local authority assurance and integrated care recruitment yielded circa, across all the roles that are currently being advertised, was around 900 applications. So it was 500 and two lots of 200. So a lot of shortlisting for somebody. But what was really impressive around the numbers was the quality. And that made it quite a challenging long listing and shortlisting process because of the volume and the quality, which was really encouraging from a recruitment perspective. So now also we're thinking about actually, whilst that addressed that campaign, but actually the numbers there, what's the art of the possible in terms of any other roles that we have in terms of inspectors and assessors across ops. So I think that was, worth sharing as hot off the press. We'll continue to look at the data that's contained and collected in ASR. We've had feedback around collating job share, and we've had the functionality to start and do that. As we rebuild the structures in the organisation in ASR, which will be a significant task, we will look to any improvements we can make on the data collection. So, hopefully that we'll see that come to fruition. In terms of how we can report and quickly access data that we need to. We touched on staff survey. So the next full survey is being prepared now in terms of the question bank and socialising the proposals through our internal governance. And then after we have that full survey, which will be commence at the start of 2024 as we come out of Christmas leave, we will think about what the next planned surveys are following that. We are looking at how we provide that data, provide the survey, and that'll be an ongoing conversation early 2024. But the full staff survey is being planned now, and I can keep you abreast of how that goes. And we are looking at a quicker turnaround with suppliers in terms of the data that provides. And I think really they were the three things I just wanted to add in to the data that I've already provided, but happy to take any questions on anything that's already there or other things that might be on colleagues' minds.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Jackie. You've given us a lot more information. I think this pack has got progressively more insightful over the last year or so I've been here, so thank you very much for that. If any of my colleagues have observations on that or things they'd like to see, can I invite to give them to Jackie, but we'll take them offline rather than now. I had nothing to add majorly, although I do have one or two questions on the data if we have time. But anyway, let me hand over to my colleagues. Any comments, observations, questions? Mark.
Thanks, and thanks very much, Jackie. It's really good to see such a comprehensive report. I was drawn to the recognition page just because it's something that many organisations don't spend time and effort on, and it's tremendously important and much more impactful than people think. I think we introduced this. You introduced this a couple of years ago, as I understand it. But what are we doing to sort of try and get the criteria right? Because we've still got sort of half of them are just down as categorised as other. And what are we doing to push the shape of that curve further to the right? Because it's still quite top heavy in terms of the recipients.
Yeah. So I think you're right. It's been in place for 2 years, and it has been successful, and it has been well received. But there is much more we can do with that. So as part of the reward work, the recognition and reward work that we've commissioned, recognition is part of that, and basically looking at technology solutions, what other public and private sectors companies are using in terms of recognition, not all monetary value, but a combination of the both. So at the moment we're doing a benchmarking piece, looking across many industries to see basically what will be our value add. We already have our Edenred platform, which we probably need to advertise more in terms of a lot of the benefits and discounts, and are part of the civil service as well, in terms of their discount programme. So it's all up for review at the moment, including this, and also working with finance colleagues in terms of what the art of the possible is.
May I just add, so just a flag, so it shows the largest percentage of these recognitions go to B grades, and just a reminder for colleagues, so those are our inspectors, so actually our largest number of our workforce is in that B grade column, so where the rewards are being dished out broadly is in line with where you'd see the volumes of our people in the organisation. So yeah, just wanted to make that point, thank you.
Ian,
And just to build on that, I think the other thing we do at an individual directorate level is look at this at a much lower level as well. So as Kate said, this sort of broadly reflects the shape of the workforce on one level, but I think one of the things we were interested in doing is looking at impact, because obviously a voucher for some colleagues will have more of an impact than for others. So again, looking at that as well.
Mark.
Another point, if I may, just want to say particular congratulations, Jackie, to you and the team on the inclusive leadership pathway. As that draws to a conclusion, in the pack you've listed out the number of people that have successfully got promotion during that period. So 11 out of 39 people on the inclusive leadership programme, which is made up of colleagues from an ethnic minority or colleagues from a disabled background, have had a promotion, which I think is absolutely incredible. And also that you're moving on to extend the reverse mentoring programme to that cohort of colleagues in the organisation, which I think is to be applauded. Thank you.
Can I just ask about the reverse mentoring? I mean, maybe we take this offline, but certainly since I arrived, or as of the date I arrived, the board hasn't been, but the non-executive part of the board hasn't been involved in that. I wonder if we might reconsider. I don't want to commit my colleagues to things, but I think it would be worthy of a discussion, seeing what we might do. I think it used to happen, didn't it? But not in my time here.
So very briefly, we've only run this once, and we ran it, and then we also wanted to evaluate it to understand colleagues' experiences of being on it, and then that evaluation has informed our plan for this so it's only the second phase we're talking about, but the intention, absolutely, Jackie, isn't it, is to offer it to colleagues around this table as well. And as someone who's been on the programme before myself, and I've had a mentor, I would highly recommend it to others also.
Okay, thanks. Mark.
Thank you. So great to see the report. It's a good format, and I like the sort of chronological story it tells for a person's journey. One thing I'm just sort of aware of is there's lots of valuable current activity, whether that's Leaders to Lead Change, whether it's a talent program with the introduction of the 9-box grid, whether it's coaching and mentoring frameworks. And I'm also aware that we've got a larger piece of cultural work going on in parallel. So what are the thoughts about making sure that, yes, we keep going, but then we can also point and course correct as the culture work matures, so that we don't have a generation that have been through a program but it feels a little bit out of date?
It's not on.
Yeah, that's exactly. We've had the conversation actually just this morning around the talent programme and where that fits in with the culture. Because actually, when you look at a lot of our activity, with this, say, if you were looking at culture as being the foundation, a lot of the activity that we have builds on that, and there's an interdependency as well. Talent being one of them. So actually, we've had 2 or 3 rounds of talent conversations, talent plotting, but actually it's, for me now, it's what next, and where does that fit in, and how can we refine, improve and value add to talent amongst a whole myriad of other things that basically give a much stronger people proposition. So I think I absolutely recognise the point that there's relationships and interdependencies with so many of the work and activities that we undertake.
Sorry, Stephen, sorry. The sun's shining right behind you. You're almost invisible from...
Jackie, thank you. Really helpful report, and I think it shows that you and colleagues are making a lot of progress in some really important areas, so thank you. Welcome, like others, the mentoring scheme. You call it reverse. In my previous job, we had a reciprocal mentoring scheme, and there may be something worth thinking about kind of how does this relationship work to the benefit of both parties, but I just kind of leave that with you. I'd certainly welcome being involved in the scheme. The questions I had, page 29 of the All Papers pack, as Mark commented, you've made some really, really good progress in recruitment and promotion of ethnic minority colleagues, but if I'm reading the figures right, the turnover rate is much higher. Is there an issue there? Kind of, are we recruiting people and they then leave rather quickly, or what's?
No, there isn't an issue with this with this particular data pack. It encapsulates a number of fixed-term contractors where they were specifically recruited because of their technology skills to support the transformation. Those contracts are now rolling off. They've come to an end. The work is concluded, and also it captures the time scale where there would have been some voluntary severance, and also there is a number of colleagues who took retirement in there as well.
Okay.
What's your question, Stephen?
I think so. I mean,
So in terms of the contractors, so yeah. So the colleagues I'm specifically talking about were here for a time-bound period only, and there was 2.5. The ratio was 2.5 extra in the technology arena, and those contracts have now come to an end. So you would expect to see it increase slightly because of the fact that there was a bigger number of colleagues in that cohort who were leaving at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
The other question, if I may, it's a link through actually to the health and safety report, which may sound a bit counterintuitive, but that report says 95% of the workforce are home working on a contractual basis. And I just thought, wow, that must have quite interesting consequences for the work that you and your colleagues are doing in HR, including in relation to culture. Kind of, is there work ongoing about whether this is now a stable position in the right position, or are there consequences for colleagues? I'm just interested in that sort of read across to your actual patterns of working in the organisation.
I think there's one thing I would like to sort of, I don't think we should forget, is I think our organisation pre-COVID had a higher number of homework and contracts because of the nature of the inspectors anyway. So I think that was our starting point. And I think in terms of the homeworking, I have to say I haven't really noticed a significant detriment in terms of the people work. You know, I think, and I do think as we have moved further away from COVID, I think we are seeing more people come into offices for meetings, more people wanting to meet up. But I haven't really had anything across my desk that would cause me great concern in terms of this is a burning platform.
Kate, do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you, if I may. Yes, I think about 65% of our workforce were home workers prior to COVID. So I know other organisations went on a massive transformation when it came to home working. Ours was less so. I think for all of us exec colleagues who have been on away days recently, been on Tyson's launch events, what you hear time and time again from colleagues is it is so lovely to get together in person. Yes. So I think what's important when we do the cultural work, I don't think this is about anyone saying, you know, mandating how this should look, but I think inviting our teams, as they will be doing now, to think about what sort of setup, what sort of forum does it add value to come together in person, be it a monthly team meeting, be it a strategy session, etc. Because we know it really matters to our people to get together. I think it's just really important that we create the culture where those teams set out for themselves what good looks like, and that they're kind of supported to do it rather than anything being mandated. And as you say, Stephen, 95% of our workforce now have a home worker contract, so we also need to be really sensitive that they manage their time correctly between being in the office and being at home as well.
Tyson, do you want to add?
Thank you. I completely agree with Kate about the value of bringing people together occasionally, and I've really enjoyed the launch events we've had. But the other point I was going to make is that part of our design for our new integrated teams was that people were as close to where they worked as possible, so that it would be much more efficient in future if people didn't have to travel large distances to inspect, for example. So we've almost designed ourselves into that home working way, but I think bringing people together from time to time for team meetings or conferences or whatever is also a bit of the blend that we need to have going forward.
Thanks. See you, you want to say?
Yeah, and just to finally pick up on that point, I think to Tyson's point, we have built an organisational design with the new transformation programme that enables assessors, inspectors to work collaboratively together. That's been designed in a way that it wasn't designed in before. We've now got the technology that enables us to collaborate, and for everybody to know what everyone's doing, which again is important. And all of the managerial development activity is all about creating a culture in a workforce which is largely a field force. So all of those things together, I think what we're trying to do is say, we're not doing a generic culture change program. What we're saying is we need to build a culture for this organisation in 2023 with the work patterns and the technology stack and so forth. So I think it's a really good challenge, I think, but it's something that we've debated long and hard and feel that the different components, when glued together, will be okay. But it's something we are very much alive to. Thank you.
Can I, just in terms of the data you presented, Jackie, I mean, I do like that sort of overall people summary with the arrows. I mean, A, it's easy to absorb, and B, it's encouraging to see that the vast majority on the green are going the right way. So I had a couple of really detailed questions, or one more than the other, on the data that follows. On it's page 27 on my board pack. I don't have one for you, but there's the diversity declarations. I just want to make sure I've understood what this says. So if I look at the column called ethnic origin, 92.7%, does that mean that 92.7% of our people agreed to declare an ethnic origin? Okay. So when we look at overall, what does that of 90.5%, what does that mean?
That's the overall diversity.
So 92.7% of people declared ethnic origin, 93.7% disability, but 90.5% of what people responded in any of the above categories?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a bit of an average, but it doesn't actually, okay. More specifically, just interested if they said the good thing about this is that most things are moving in the right direction, and there was little that sort of stood out for you as a major problem. But I just wanted to pick up on the leavers diversity, because the overall turnover rate is 12.1%. But then if we look at the categories, LGBT plus 13.7, same with disabled, and ethnicity is 20.5. So that must mean if you're not in those categories, and the average is 12.1, the average must be quite a lot lower. So there is a big difference between people who don't fit in those categories and people who do, but in particular ethnicity at 20% seems quite high. I just wondered if we had any insights on what's driving that.
No, I would have to take that away and put it back with that.
I mean, it's partly a statistical question, but I think the more substantive one is we appear to have a much higher turnover rate with people from an ethnic minority. I think we ought to try and get behind that.
So the only reason I know about this is we looked at it for exactly the same reason that you did. So it relates to Jackie's earlier point. There are a number of people that are on the transformation programme in fixed terms roles, particularly in technology, who come from a BME community. Because that work has finished, their contract has finished, and it's reflected in these figures. So their work has come to a natural end because that part of the transformation has come to an end. There is a higher degree of people from a BNA community in that community. There are a lot of the people working on the technology solutions. So they're in a sense, that particular part of it, which is what Jackie was describing earlier, there's a group of people that we had expected to move off as we come to the end of the transformation programme. They have indeed moved off. That cohort of people are overrepresented by people from the BME community, which is why the leavers figures look, they're distorted by that move off as fixed term contract people leave.
Okay, that's really helpful. So basically we're saying there is not a systemic problem for the organisation, it's a statistical anomaly because of the ethnic mix of a particular cohort of people who are leaving. So we would expect it to see that change next time round. Okay. David.
What I've found from a lot of organisations is that the attitude to and the methods of managing people in the post-COVID time with home working is quite starkly different from the experience when they were forced to work at home through the COVID situation. And bear in mind that this is a very fertile area of research at the moment, a lot of papers produced, etc. I just wondered where you got where you were looking for your evidence about the best way of managing this situation because of this point of difference between successful management styles during COVID and post-COVID, because the attitude of people to home working has changed very significantly.
I think perhaps Kate have a first go at this.
Yeah, so as I said, so 95% of people prior to the pandemic were used to being line managed by someone remotely and not in the office. So it's been a change of about 30% of our line managers needing to adapt to different ways of working. I think when we look at where this works well, so where we've had a kind of historical track record about this, it's really critical for managers to manage kind of outcomes and outputs from their employees rather than hours and minutes spent at the desk. So I think having that clarity of expectations between an individual and their line manager about how they'll meet business need, how they will deliver X amount of outputs during their working week. But one of the benefits of working for us, Jackie talks about, how delighted we were with the number of people who have applied to and to come and work with us. People are drawn to us for our purpose, which is the most important reason why we'd want people to come and work for us. But also we do offer that degree of flexibility as well. So I think as the rest of the organisation adapted to what 65% of the organisation was doing anyway, I think that emphasis on clarity about outputs rather than measuring the amount of minutes someone sat at their desk is absolutely critical. And that's the kind of autonomy that that's the kind of culture we want in our organisation. No, people shouldn't be micromanaged. We should judge someone's success on their ability to deliver the outcomes rather than minutes of the.
So, looking outside to other organisations for their experience at all, it's just an open question, or are we relying on our own information?
So I'm not aware that we've particularly done that, but certainly as we start down this cultural work, that would be something we would maybe want to do, but I'll hand to Jackie.
I think there's another dynamic to this as well, and this is post-COVID. Whilst we talk about home working, we also had quite a significant percentage of colleagues that may have been office-based but didn't have their teams in that office. So for a number of years, I'm based in the north, and I have never had really a big direct reports in the north. All my team have been always spread across the country, not necessarily home workers, but in offices. And I'm not unique in that situation. So I think, I'm not sure we've got a problem to solve here. I think you're right in terms of if there's a different way of thinking about things, but I'm not sure as an organisation that we have a problem to solve. I think we can continue to evaluate, and we can continue to think about leadership and management and the benefits of coming together and the use of technology. But I would also counter that actually spending several hours on a train, whereas you can pick up technology, is a worthwhile consideration too. So I think, I think it's an ongoing conversation, but I'm not sure that we've got a problem to solve at the moment.
I mean, I don't want, maybe David's making a different point, but I was going to say something similar. It doesn't mean to say we've necessarily got a problem, but we are different because of the number of people that were working from home even before. But the fact is that this transition from workplace working to home working is an issue everyone's facing. People are trying to deal with it. So there will be people out there who are suffering things that maybe we're not suffering yet, but we might do, or they've got good solutions to potential issues that we haven't thought of. So I think it's worth finding a way, whether it's through other ALB networks or other HR directors or whatever, but just keeping an eye on it. I mean, there are screeds of papers written by consultants at the moment about the impact on mental health and skeletal problems and you name it. We may not have any of those, but I would encourage you to look outside and just see what others are finding, and then conclude, if necessary, we haven't got them, as opposed to saying we haven't noticed it yet, but we just be careful, someone else might have seen it. I think that's probably what I was saying, isn't it, David?
More clearly put than I.
Didn't mean that, sorry. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, look, Jackie, thanks very much. I mean, again, thanks firstly for the clarity of the report and the improvements you made in reporting, and also you may not be solely responsible for the better results, but that looks better as well. But I think there's probably a couple of things there to think about. Okay, thank you. Right, we're on to the quarterly performance report. I think this is, again, probably Kate for you to introduce, and Chris, and no doubt Tyson will have comments to make. So perhaps I could just hand over to you to introduce it, Kate.
Thank you.
It's on my list, but Steph, welcome. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you. So this report is providing an overview of performance up to the end of Q2, up to September of this year. You'll note as you look at the report there are some areas where good progress has been made and performance has been met. There are other areas where we continue to keep a really close eye as we see performance needing to, we need to see some moves in regards to performance hitting the expected standards. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Steph, our Head of Performance, to bring you through the highlights, unless Chris wants to say anything first. I'll go to you. Chris.
I'll do it. Steph can take all of the questions. So yeah, as you said, this is our performance report to the end of September. Just one thing to flag in the report, we have taken on board and tried to address the amount of monitor trends we had previously. There are about 4, I think, that are still monitor, where it's hard to set a target, but we've tried to incorporate whether things are improving or declining to add a bit more light to the trend there. Just to run through some of the key results to pull out, and then I'll hand over to Tyson. Safeguarding alerts and whistleblowing, we've currently got this down as not met, which is primarily due to the temporary issue we had following the go-live of our new contact service in July. You can see in the graphs performance is recovering, but we just need to monitor this closely. Areas such as safeguarding alerts, first graph has particularly low volumes, therefore can be volatile. So performance is heading in the right direction after that dip, but we monitor that closely. In key result 3, NCSC response times also not met. Again, continuing to see challenges with the response times to some call lines in NCSC, not all. This is partly due to adjusting to the transition to a new contact service as well, but there's also, I think, resourcing challenges within the centre that Tyson and the team are reviewing. Under smarter regulation, our key result 2, which is to increase the amount of inspections triggered by risk. So we set ourselves a target of increasing that volume. Last year we had 86%, and this year up to 91% of inspections triggered by risk. That's either inherent risk, where things we're aware of, such as inadequate services, or new and emerging risks, such as whistleblowing information we've had. Key result 5, out of hours, again another area we've increased. Last year we had 9.2% of activity included out of hours site visits. We're now up to 10.7, although as I'm sure we'll come on to, we are still looking to redefine what we mean as out of hours and make sure we've got a clear definition and looking to pilot some work in that area. And in terms of registration, another area to pull out, which is key result 7. We've got 35% of registration applications are over 10 weeks old, which is an increase on last financial year and is increasing. The volume of applications continues to increase in this area, so we've seen demand really soar at the same time as having resourcing challenges in registration. So we've been doing a bit of work to look at how we can address that and how we can look at how the resources in registration, which Tyson may want to touch on. A couple of final bits. Risk, we've got 9 risks that exceed our tolerance. However, what we don't have in the plan is what we're doing about those. There is a plan against each with a path to green, so we're closely monitoring those to get them back into a tolerated space. And in terms of finance, at the end of September, we had a 0.9 million deficit on a revenue expenditure, which is forecast to increase to 4.7 million by the end of the year. That's largely down to our grant and aid position, which is due to pressures such as COVID inquiry, which is something we are trying to accommodate into our funding allocation, as well as the impact of pay agreements. On our capital position, we've got 3.2 million overspend year to date. That's forecast to increase to 7.1 million by the end of the year, so it's an increasing deficit. We're trying to minimise that as much as possible, but also in conversations with the department about how we can address that position. So I think hand over to Tyson, if you want to come in.
Tyson.
Thank you, and thank you, Chris. I was just going to expand slightly on a couple of the measures Chris talked about. Firstly, on safeguarding alerts, I think Chris has explained why the performance was as it was in July, and that we are now working hard to recover the position. And we keep a regular watch, including weekly, at our ET meetings on the position. I think it's worth reminding the board that in July, even though we weren't able to process the alerts digitally, we were still contacting local authorities, I think, over the phone to let them know about the material we were receiving. And also colleagues in regulatory leadership did a piece of assurance work to help us reassure ourselves that during that time we were still able to keep people safe. And on registration, I think when you're faced with a situation where demand, which has gone up by 40% over the last 3 years, is outstripping capacity, I think there are probably 3 things you can do. One is to do with people, and you need more people, and we are busily recruiting, and Chris and his investment committee have been very helpful in that regard, and we're working hard to recruit up to our full complement by the end of the financial year. I think the second one is to do with processes, and I'd pay tribute to the team in registration and the senior leaders in particular who have worked very hard to lean out the processes. I had a long session with them a couple of weeks ago where I thought I could come up with some bright ideas about how we can make things more efficient, but all the ideas I had already been done. But we're coming to ET in a week or so to have a similar session, and just to see if some slightly fresher pairs of eyes will also have a look at the processes and make sure we've leaned them out as much as we can. And in the final one, the final P is productivity, and a tribute to the teams in registration who've been working under a lot of pressure, but the productivity remains very high. And last month we managed the output was 3,200 applications, which is returning us to where we were before the summer. And given that there are fewer numbers of people working in registration at the moment, that sort of output is really impressive. So I think probably the immediate thing we need to do is to keep bringing people in. We roll out the enforcement part of the transformation programme in February, and that will start to help, and there will be further developments. But I realise that having 40% over the 10 weeks target is not what we're aiming for. So we are keeping it under constant review and pulling whatever levers we can.
Okay, thanks, Tyson. Questions or comments from colleagues? Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it's your hand. Sorry, I thought we were pointing at someone. Belinda, I'll come to you in a moment.
And just to add to what Tyson's just said, we also have a fast-track process as well for those applications where an application is going to add additional capacity to, particularly to NHS or local authority-funded care, in order to make sure that we can act quickly. So we can move quickly if we need to.
Belinda, I'll come to you and then Mark.
Oh, thank you. So in the performance report, there's a couple of items that are classed as on hold, about monitoring the time of the Mental Health Act reviews and reducing the average time between assessments. I just wonder if you could explain why they're on hold and when you think they'll be coming on track again.
Just in terms of that, so the Mental Health Act is, it's just in terms of accessing that data, to be honest, Belinda. So we have access at it in terms of at a level whereby we can go in and explore it, but not at a level where we can report it at scale. So that is on hold at the moment for that purpose, and that is part of our digital transformation. What was the second one you said? Sorry, I couldn't capture it.
Sorry, it was in the Smart regulation, key result 4, reduce the average time between assessments. I wasn't even quite sure what that meant either, actually.
So I think this one is a bit of a nature of, we're in a business plan year where we're talking old methodology and new methodology, and that's probably why that may not always make sense. So that is to set us up for the future, and that we want to look at the average time between us assessing a service. What we were looking at previously is the average time between an inspection, but we're in a hybrid state where we're looking at inspections and assessments. With our new regulatory model, the aspiration is that we'll actually be going into services a lot more often, and that's what that metric is designed to look at. But we're just working out a way to combine those two methodologies together to be able to report on that more accurately.
Mark.
So thank you for the report. Again, sort of setting the context for the comments I'm going to make. One is, we've just seen the outstanding work that's been done to do the Go Live 3.1. The updates give a lot of narrative to the assurance of the progress we're making. I'm still relatively new to the board, so I'm going to give this with maybe some fresh eyes to this. If you think about what this sort of KPI scorecard does for us, which is to give us assurance, help us focus on the right topics to discuss, make sure we're making decisions and driving action, I still think we've got a little bit of way to go, because if you take a step back, we have only very few percentage of these that we actually say are met. Does that mean that we've been too ambitious and we set the scorecard too high on some of these other measures? There's quite a lot that we're just sort of tracking, which doesn't necessarily lead to action. So I think we've got to ask ourselves, are we looking at this in the right way? Also, reading it, I would have a question and then maybe 4 pages later I'd get the answer, and maybe there's a way of visually presenting the answer closer to the question so that we're actually helping drive the conversation earlier. Just to give what, and I realize this is also in the context that all of us are owning that journey from going from looking at inputs to outputs to really focusing on the outcomes that we're driving. As one example, key result 19 under smarter regulation, which is increasing the positive sentiment for recommendation as CQC as a place to work, we have as met, which would then take our focus off that and say we should not be looking at that. But when we dig one click deeper, it's 40%, and that's a data point from May 23, up from 37 in September 22. I don't think anyone here says that's where we want to be, and it doesn't feel like met, and I know the culture work as a result of that. So it's just more taking an opportunity to sort of say, I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of having this support the intent or reflect the great work that's being done under some of these topics.
Sorry, Stephen, you wanted to comment, but that was really more of an observation. But I mean, I was going to make the same point about actions. I mean, I think I touched on another meeting recently, but I think if the performance reporting tells us how a particular metric is compared to original expectation, which we define how like budget, ambition, whatever, maybe you want a stretch target in there and prior periods, but I think if it's not where you want it to be, then there's two things. One is why, can we interpret it, and then B, so what are we going to do about it? So I think I quite take your point on the action. On the point of putting it all in the one place, I mean, Chris, you may want to add, but I shared with Chris the other day and one I'd come across before, which I thought was quite a helpful template, which kind of put on one page the metrics around area and then a block with so what do management think and then what are we doing about it. And I think if we could move to that, it would be helpful. I also have a question, but Stephen, let me come to you first.
It was, firstly, to agree with Mark, it would be really helpful going forward if all of these key results could have a target so that we could track whether or not we were pursuing that. And it may be the same point as Ian was just making. Could the underneath this always explain why we think indicators are not met or not improving where they're not? Some of them, if you just to take an example, key result 6, the days per quarter where we're involving experts by experiences decline, there's a narrative about what that figure decline is, but it tells us nothing about why, let alone what are we doing about it. So it'd be really helpful where, you know, wherever we're not meeting what we said we would try to do, could we have a bit of explanation why?
Anything to say, Steph?
Thank you both for your comments, I guess. So, and I absolutely recognise what you're saying. And I think, Mark, your point about have we been too ambitious? I don't know if it's necessarily we've been too ambitious in the individual metrics, but I think there is a point of reflection in terms of the sheer scale of what we've got in our business plan, both the metrics that we have and the milestones we have, and I think that's, I guess, in part why visually I think it overcomplicates it. We recognise that as we move into the next year, we need that kind of high level 6 to 10 metrics that give that indication, and when you don't have them, you drill down into it. And I think that in part makes this a complex report to read, because we wanted to show in our business plan and to assure public and providers that, you know, we have all of these aspirations in our strategy and we're holding ourselves to them, but actually in doing so and having that sheer complexity in the business plan, I think that has made it exceptionally complex to report on and made it difficult to be able to truly see the narrative. So I just thank you for your comments, and I think we need to visually try to represent this better.
Thanks, Steph. Ali.
Thank you very much for the update. When I was going through the paper, I did notice, as has been called out and highlighted, the challenges around safeguarding and whistleblowing concerns and responding to them, and I appreciate the commentary that's been given about this too. I had a couple of follow-on questions from this. Firstly, if we look at the speed of recovery of the metrics for whistleblowing, they are somewhat slower than safeguarding, and I wonder whether there was any specific reason that's underpinning that. Secondly, just recognising that we're reporting to the end of September, and we're now nearly at the end of November, I wonder if we would be able to confidently say at this stage we think we're broadly on track, or if there's more work to be done.
So, Kate, sorry, Steph, you go first.
I just wanted to give a bit of context in terms of the whistleblowing metric, because they're in seeing a rolling 12 months, that may add some confusion to that. Last year, our metric was around 5 days for a whistleblowing, and we did change that on the 1st of April, and we changed our aspirations as to how we would respond to whistleblowings. From the 1st of April, we looked at a priority 1, where we're the only people that know about that concern or potential neglect, would be 1 day. Priority 2, which is where other parties be aware but there is still a risk of harm to an individual, would be 3 days. And the remainder of those whistleblowings is 5 days. So I think there is something to recognise in that chart that actually the previous year's visuals were based upon a 5-day metric, and we've really aspired to be more timely in how we respond this year. So I think actually having that in one visual causes some confusion, because you can't compare last year's delivery to this year's, because we are aspiring to do it in a much more timely way, which is the right thing to do, but it has taken us time between both transformation and that shift to be able to get to where we want to be.
That's your question, Ali? Tyson, do you want to add?
I was just going to pick up on the sort of consistency point, and I was trying to pull up the latest data. Steph may have it to hand while I talk, but I think it's fair to say it's continued to recover. You know, some weeks it's been higher than other weeks, but we haven't got anywhere near the levels we reached in July, and we do keep it under constant observation, and as I said, it's part of the pack that we consider as an executive team every Friday, and my directors and I get quizzed on performance on both of those indicators, so it's something we keep under close review, and the performance has been higher than it was, but I think the most recent data was quite encouraging, but I don't know if you know, Steph.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So looking at the data that we have today, this report's updated on a daily basis, so the year-to-date figure is now up to, is at 78% for protected disclosures. So we are seeing a slight increase in the figure that's proposed from September.
So no other questions. Steph, a request and a question, both fairly detailed. On page... you've responded, I think, to previous comments about giving us a better feel. It's not just met or not met, so we've got gradations and colours. That's all very helpful. But I wonder if you could go a step further and give us some definitions of what it means to be close, but also some consistency. So if you look on page 24, one thing is met or almost met, and another one is close to target. And I struggle to understand the difference between the two. That's not a question for now. But if you could... define, within 10% or something, and then be consistent, be really helpful. The question, it may just be a typo, but on page, if I can find it, there is a point about, the number of people with development plans. Sorry about this. My machine is frozen. I'll be with you in a moment. Yes, on page, it's 58, beg your pardon, 50 of diligent, page 16 of the pack, key result 15, it says that in the second quarter, 0.5% of our colleagues have a career development plan. I thought the ambition was pretty much everyone had one, but we're saying that 99.5% don't.
So I guess this is, we have an aspiration to do this, but we haven't made this mandatory in the organisation. So when we put the pack together, we obviously wanted to be transparent in terms of the data that we had, but what we've also done is add additional context of the learning and development that is existing across the organisation. So we haven't made a development plan mandatory, but what we can see is the sheer volume of activity that is undertaken across the organisation in terms of development and the opportunities that are available for colleagues. I think that's something that I can work on with Jackie in terms of ensuring that we get the right balance between our people and culture and our performance work to ensure that what we're aspiring to do is something we can measure and that those two align up in the future.
If I could ask you to pick up with Jackie, because we were discussing in the Remco yesterday, and I had the statistic in the back of my mind, but she hadn't got these papers and I couldn't remember. But she basically said most of our people have career development plans, so there's a disconnect between what we were being told then, looking at development of our people, and the statistic here. So if it is 0.5%, I think that's a real problem. I mean, I understand if it's not mandatory, it won't be 100%, but I would expect not mandatory to be 80 or 90%, not 0.5%. So, Kate.
Just to link this to another conversation that we've had around talent management. So you'll remember that during the period of COVID, we kind of stood down our formal having a career conversation, plotting where colleagues are in terms of readiness for the next step and the next promotion. That has all restarted now. So it started with the exec grades, we've now done it with our directors, and we've done it with our heads of our kind of deputy director level. We now plan for that to be rolled out through the organisation, and that goes hand in glove with a conversation about your future, what you need to get there, and what sort of support should be on offer to you to do that. So I think having the formal structure of a talent conversation with a set format would go kind of hand in glove with also having a conversation about what a career development plan could look like as well.
So that number will be very, very, very much bigger next time we meet. Thank you very much, Kate. If there are no... Sorry, one last question. Do go ahead.
Hello there, yes, just to add on to that as well, the networks can get involved, especially around the culture element of this, and we'd happily support wherever we're needed to as well, to roll this out and encourage and promote it.
Sorry, thanks for the observation. Mark, okay, we're running a bit behind now, but Mark and then David, and then let's make
just one quick encouragement really to continue to develop and progress this. I think the notes are very helpful. I think there's a fair number of things in here where it's the best measure that we can easily get to, but it's not really necessarily telling us what is going on. So good to hear that 98% of colleagues pass probation, but until we know actually whether probation, an assessment at the end of probation is really being used or not, that's probably a more meaningful measure. We know that we've done quite a lot of work on, we looked at in RGC at out of hours and making sure that it's a genuine measure and not just inspections that start early and finish late. You know, audit recommendations. We've discussed in audit committee. You know, the impact of extending deadlines. So you know, you sometimes you're going to need some underpinning measures to make sure that your lead metric is telling us the whole story. But for the moment, if you can make sure that continue to make sure that the narrative unpacks it for us, that's really helpful.
Thanks, Mark. David?
Thank you, Chair. I'd be really interested, if it was possible, to see an anonymised example of the career development plan, because I'm kind of not quite sure what it looks like. I don't want any personal details in that, but I'd very much like to see the framework. And I guess some of my non-executive colleagues would too, because of their experience in other organisations and in doing that. And we might be able to shed some helpful suggestions on that if that's acceptable.
but if it's okay, we'll share an outline or a template at a future meeting. If it's okay, should draw stumps on that. We are running quite a bit behind, and I did say we've got Sandy sitting outside. So let's get Sandy in, and then we'll take a couple of breaks. Steph, thanks very much indeed. Welcome, Sandy. Sorry, we invite you along and then we keep you waiting for about a quarter of an hour. But anyway, welcome. You may have met some people. I know you were here a little bit earlier, so a chance to meet them over a sandwich. But if not, we've got name cards, so we won't introduce one another. It'd be helpful, and by the way, before you speak, you'll need to press the red button so that you make the microphone work. But just introduce yourself, what your organisation does, and some early observations about working with us. I think before that, though, James, you were just going to give a couple of introductory remarks.
Well, in the interest of time, Ian, I think I'll just hand straight over to Sandy. She's a very welcome new member of the regulatory leadership team. She's in the health part of that team, Sean O'Kelly's team, and we've begun in the short time that Sandy's been with us to sort of build our mutual understanding of the issues that run right across health and care.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. So a little bit about us and the programme and what we do. So the Maternity and Newborn Safety Investigation Programme was transitioned across into the CQC from the 1st of October. We're a team of about 170-ish members, and that constitutes investigators, clinical advisory team, all with a variety of backgrounds from both clinical and non-clinical. The ambition of our work is to undertake safety investigations within NHS-funded care relating to maternity. We have a defined criteria of work that we undertake, and that's instructed by directions, and some of it is undertaken under some of the CQC legislation now we've transitioned across. So the work we do, it is about ensuring that we're looking at safety, we're looking at the systems and the processes that impact on safety, and it's also just thinking about sort of where we can make recommendations to trusts in relation to improve their processes, etc. The programme does not look at apportioning blame to individuals, and it's very focused on ensuring that where we are making those recommendations, they are recommendations that trusts can implement across the system. So we have 14 teams across 4 regions, and they all work with defined groups of trusts, and they all have very close working relationships across all of those trusts in the work that they do. So we've been in place for the last nearly 5 years as HSIB, and now coming across into MNSI. We've had we've progressed over 3,500 investigations in relation to our criteria, and that is around babies and mothers, and that's really thinking about sort of babies from intrapartum stillbirth, neonatal deaths, and those with severe brain injury. We also look at maternal deaths as well as part of our work going forwards. So from that work, we have completed nearly 3,500 investigations. That has told us an awful lot about sort of what is going on in the maternity services across the whole of England. So we do identify a selection of themes, etc. in the work we do. We're in an exceptionally privileged position, so we work really closely with families, and we have a very strong family engagement model, so they really become quite central into the work that we do, and we really do a lot of work to ensure that they can engage with the work. We have specialist communication plans with them, and really think about actually the importance of their involvement and accessibility to the work that we do as well. So from those sort of additional elements, we sort of also think about thinking about where are some thematic areas of learning, and we have published a number of articles in relation to how we learn, and there's sort of a rule we have in the team is around thinking about how do we share information that you hear in Newcastle down to Penzance. How do we make sure that information is valid, important, and is relevant to the sort of healthcare providers trying to provide that work. Our teams work across multiple providers, and I think this is quite a unique position for the work we do, whereas a lot of safety investigations are very bespoke to one area of one organisation. We work with GP surgeries, ambulance services, we work across primary, secondary providers, etc., depending on where our investigation takes us. And I think that gives us a really good understanding over sort of a 9-month period of actually what happened to a mother, her baby and their families in relation to the care that they received. So it really gives us a really good understanding of that. So we do have, so the transition across the CQC has been, I think, relatively smooth. I can safely say. I think we've, the teams, we had a really tight time frame to bring the transition across, and the teams have really done an amazing job to ensure it worked. And I think that's, in recognition of the collaboration from both our team and across to the wider CQC. Everyone has made us feel very welcome and ensured that we're really in a position to support the work we do going forwards, but also think about the opportunities going forwards. So as a team, there are many resources and opportunities within the CQC, I think, that are quite exciting opportunities. Our team, we know a lot about doing safety investigations, and actually how can we share some of that, but likewise, what is there we can learn from the CQC in relation to resources. And a couple of sort of key areas really for our team are around data analytics. We have an awful lot of information. We work in and out of trusts on a daily basis, and therefore we're in a very unique position to really think about actually are the changes that we're suggesting being made and being implemented. And this enables the sort of team to just sort of think about how can we work with them and sort of where a trust says a change is being made, actually we can see some of those changes being made. And we see some really positive experiences across maternity, whereas we also see opportunities that need a little bit more further development in the work that they're doing. So I think sort of another area of risk for us in relation to our team. So our team work really closely with families, and they can work with families for 6 to 9 months up to a year and beyond. And in doing that work, they are repetitively sort of exposed to some of the traumas these families live through. And we are meeting families who are experienced in some of the worst events of their life. And the team work really closely with them to try and ensure they understand what their concerns are, what their questions are, but that does take its toll on our team. So we've been doing quite a lot of work. We've already had trauma programs in place for a number of years, but we're now implementing a much more bespoke trauma program that really thinks about the individual sort of psychological well-being requirements of our team. Another area of concern in relation to the work we do, so our work is shared quite widely across the system. So we're really involved. Once we've completed an investigation, our investigations are shared with coroners. They are also shared quite widely under sort of litigation processes. So while the initial the intention of our work is about systems and processes, I think we have to be very aware that actually that may not always be what those reports are used for. And we see some of that play through in relation to requests for information across our team, and actually what does that mean to ensure that we're supporting staff to tell us and share with us what their concerns are, and really think about how we sort of keep that information to ensure that we're making the best of that information to improve the services around us. So I think those are probably sort of the top areas of work that we do. We hold a bespoke budget. We have a £16 million budget that is ring-fenced under grant in aid. And we really sort of thinking about how we utilise that to the best of our ability across the teams sort of going forwards. But I think there's certainly some areas of opportunity around collaboration, data analytics, and thinking about thematic learning across the system. So thank you.
Stanley, thank you very much. You're so succinct. No slides, no PowerPoints. Well done. We'll have Sandy back for a longer session at a future date yet to be determined. So by then she'll have settled in and probably have a more detailed discussion. But just for now, it's an opportunity, in addition to the meeting, to just ask any burning questions or immediate questions you may have. So, particularly my non-executive colleagues, since the executive sort of better. Sandy, can I just ask you to just say a little bit more about the views of your team? I mean, how are they settling into the switchover?
Sorry, press the button. I think change is always challenging across any team, and the transition understandably created quite a lot of anxiety across our team. What would it mean coming across? You know, the team were, I suppose some of their anxiety sat around what our role is. So we're safety investigators, that is our role. We don't have a regulatory function, and it was trying to ensure that we maintain that viewpoint, both sort of reputationally around the work we've done. We have developed a really positive reputation across trusts, and they really trust in the work that we do, that we will not be talking about blame and liability, etc. So some of the anxieties have been actually what does that mean moving across into the CQC, and really thinking about actually where the positives, the positives are. I think overall, I think the team have settled across really well. I think we've been able to address their anxieties, their concerns, and I think they feel, predominantly sort of fairly forearmed and able to answer the questions and really be responsive to trust. And I think that the system of the sort of healthcare system has really shifted in the last 5 years, in that actually we need to be transparent, we need to understand, there needs to be a very open discussion. We are all here for the same reason, and I think that understanding around the ambition is the same, and we need to do that very openly. And so I think we're probably we were probably 2/3 of the way there at the point of transition, and where those questions about what information do you share with the CQC, I think we've been able to be really clear about what we do, and what we don't share information-wise with our wider CQC colleagues. But I think we've moved across in the system to really think about that actually we need to be more transparent, and we need to think about the families that we are caring for, ultimately in relation to their safety.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, look, Sandy, thank you very much indeed for coming along. We're delighted to have you on board. I'm delighted to hear that you personally are settling into the regulatory leadership team. And sorry to keep you waiting, but we do appreciate you coming along today. Look forward to meeting you in future in other circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you.
I suggest we give ourselves a 10-minute break. If we try to keep it to 10 minutes, we are behind, but I did say I'd try to keep the overrun to about a quarter of an hour, which was the 50 minutes we spent with Sandy. So see you back here in about 5 minutes, if that's possible. Thanks. Well, welcome back, everybody, those listening. I hope you managed to get a cup of tea. We have one reporting update and then a number of board governance matters to complete, and then after the conclusion of the meeting we have, as usual, 1 or 2 questions that have been posed that I'll ask the executives to answer. So we'll welcome Max Hood over there. Kate, I don't know if you want to introduce this, but we need to consider the annual health and safety report.
Thank you. So this report is for noting. It's a report for the last financial year. And as I just mentioned to Max, I know we've had a long conversation already in this board about home working, so we possibly won't major on that as we hand over to Max to do highlights. I also said it might be useful for board, as we're already in November, knocking on December, maybe to just give a flavour of how these themes have or haven't changed through this year, as well as a bit of a kind of hot off the press, what we need to know. But without further ado, I'll hand to Max.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. I think the report sets out, relatively speaking, we're a low-risk, low-incidence organisation when it comes to health and safety, but we're not a no-risk organisation. So the primary things that we're seeing are threats and verbal abuse, which is mainly our colleagues in NCSC, but not exclusively. So we see that sometimes from providers, people on inspections on site. DSC-related risks continue to be sort of quite a big issue for us. We've got pretty high compliance with DSC assessments, but we're seeing, and coming back to Kate's point just now, certainly in this year, we're seeing an increasing trend of more assistance and more help being asked of us for reasonable adjustment equipment for people working in offices or in homes. And then work-related stress, still, certainly in the reporting year, was an issue. There's a lot of work gone on with colleagues in the People Directorate to make sure that managers have got the right training and support in place to support people, and individual risk assessments are carried out to support people in those situations. But overall, I think we're not seeing an increase in reporting, but there is still sufficient reporting to cause concern and make sure we've got the right measures in place and keep a close eye on things.
Thanks so much, Max. Admirably brief, and thank you for the report. Do any of the other executives wish to add anything? And then if not, I'll go to questions. No? Yes?
Yes, can I say? The one area that we discussed as an exec team that I was particularly concerned about was this idea of colleagues being abused. I was particularly concerned about colleagues who were out on inspection, and it's something that we need to keep a close eye on. I think there's an understandable natural reluctance sometimes for colleagues to report these sorts of things, but I know it's something we're working with Tyson's group on encouraging people to report this so that we can decide what action we might take, because I just think it's totally unacceptable for providers to be abusing inspection colleagues, and you know, there may very well be regulatory consequences to those providers that do that. It feels, you know, completely instinctively wrong that if you can't have a sensible conversation with an inspector, that calls into question your ability to deliver a caring service, in my view. So it is something that I'm very keen our inspection colleagues do report, and then we will take strong action. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add, I mean, I speak for everyone on the board, be absolutely clear. I mean, ill treatment of our people is utterly unacceptable. So for anyone, members of our people listening, or really I'll ask you to pass it back if the message, we do expect any adverse incidents to be reported, and we will take them seriously. End of. So, Mark.
I strongly agree with that. And another important area where we want people to report is near misses, because you quite often learn as much from a near miss as an incident. Are you happy with the level of reporting there? Is there more that we can do? Have we got some benchmarking that tells us whether we're tracking enough of that?
I think there is more we can do. We've previously had near-miss campaigns to try and encourage colleagues to report, but that's a little while ago, and I think this came up at when we presented the paper to ET. I think an awareness campaign would be good, and particularly sharing this information wider with colleagues about what we're seeing, but also encouraging more near-miss reporting. There's a very strong correlation, as you say, between good safety cultures and high levels of near-miss reporting. And I think we are still on the low side.
And I suppose we should emphasise as well, giving events in other parts of the world, there are many other examples of tensions rising in this, so we do need to make sure that the message we talked about is emphasised. Ali.
Thank you very much for a clear report. I had a question about the slide with the number of incidents, so 188 between April 22 and March 23. I'm keen to explore a bit more about how we think about severity of incidents and our response proportionate to the levels of severity of those incidents. I wondered if you could share a bit more.
Thank you. Each incident is investigated, so we've got a small but very active health and safety team. And so each of these is investigated with the individual and the line manager of the individual. I think we've identified some areas where we'd like to improve on our reporting, like giving a bit more granular detail. And I think severity is one of the things that's probably missing from this, because it's just numbers, isn't it? It doesn't give a real understanding. So I think we've got a few other things from our meeting earlier in the year with ET on this as well. We've got some suggestions just to give that a little bit more detail. So I'm happy to take that away for future reporting. In terms of some of the things that we see, there are some, very small number, but there are some quite serious incidents mixed in with quite a lot of low-level incidents as well. So I think if we can draw those out, it'll provide a sort of better picture for us. But what I would say, when all of these instances take place, the support that we give colleagues, I think, is pretty good, and particularly when they're of a more serious nature, we get fantastic support from colleagues, both in the line management chain and also from our people directorate.
Thanks, Max. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? No. So, Max, I think a clear report, comforting, but still work to do, and some messages to get out about our intolerance of any abuse of our people. Sorry, was there any? No, I thought someone else was speaking. Okay, so thank you very much indeed, Max.
Thank you, Chair.
We've now got a number of board and committee matters, so we've got a couple of oral reports. Mark, I just wondered if you could give us a brief oral report of the last RGC meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. As a reminder, RGC is the committee that looks at the design, delivery and effectiveness of our regulatory model, and we had a meeting at the end of October. As part of our sort of, there's two parts to it. First part is a regular look at some of the component elements to design and delivery, and then the second part is a deep dive on a particular area. As part of that first part, we looked at progress of the rollout of the single assessment framework, internal and external feedback so far, and how that interrelated with our plans for winter, because of course it's tremendously important that we continue to deliver to our program of inspections at the same time as rolling out our new approach. As we looked at the deep dive this time was on silent services. Our new approach to regulation, obviously a key core part of it is triangulating a lot of information to get an assessment of risk. So we draw in information from providers, feedback from service users and their families who give us feedback on care, third-party information, and insights from those who are brave enough to speak up as part of whistleblowing. But of course, one of the limitations to that triangulation exercise is if the data is not there, and there are services where, despite our best efforts, we're not getting a lot of feedback. So we looked at that in the context of an understanding of the operation of the single assessment framework, where we do have access to all the information that we would like, and how we are assessing the risk in those services where we don't hear quite so much. The data that we see at the committee continues to improve. We are, as a couple of examples, we raised a concern at the last meeting about an apparent tail of unpublished reports, and the need to better understand that. As we drilled into that, actually a lot of it was a data problem rather than a substantive backlog of unpublished reports. So that's encouraging, and we've also tried to make sure that we're clear on how that is going to be assessed going forward. We saw in one of the earlier papers here about the significant number of recommendations that we've had from third parties in terms of how we could improve, and there were about 200 listed at the last RGC. I think we're getting a reasonable oversight now as to how those are being progressed and actioned, but what we want to see at the next meeting is more unpacking of some of the themes and learnings and insights that we've had from that, and how those are being addressed. Our next meeting, the topic at our next meeting is going to be whistleblowing. It is a really important challenge for us. We're aware of how much courage and conviction is required for people to speak up about services that they're part of. We'll spend more time going through it than we would have been able to in this forum, and we'll also be concentrating on what we're doing to support and protect people who do raise their concerns with us. So that next meeting will be in the middle of January.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any questions for Mark? Okay. I should thank you very much, Mark. I should comment on the remuneration committee. So that's a committee I chair, comprising only non-executives. The nature of the agenda means that it is pretty much all sensitive. But as a point of principle, we do have obligations. So I think it's right that the board is made aware that we do meet and consider things. We actually had a meeting yesterday afternoon, so hot off the press, and broadly we covered 4 things. One was to look at the results of what we call a talent review the management have carried out, and the implications of that for succession, both immediate should it become necessary, but also longer term. Secondly, we do have an explicit responsibility to look at the pay position or approvals for ESMs, senior managers. Many of the things we'd want to do have to be approved by, but some is delegated to the executive, some is for our committee, some is for the DHSC committee, some have to go through more than one of those stages. The DHSC rules haven't changed necessarily, but I think we've formalised our approach to ensure that we do comply with them and that we consider the right things at the right time. So I think it's just sort of tightening up internally, but it was helpful to have that agreed, but there's no major change to anything. We did consider, and were asked to consider approving a number of business cases for recruitment, predominantly replacement of existing places, although one was for a potential new position, which we did, and were supportive of all of them, although 1 or 2 require a little bit of modification, so it's approval subject to some tweaking. And last but by no means least, we are a unitary board, and we did spend some time looking at the current and future membership of the board and what proposals we ought to come up with. So I think those are the 4 main areas. Many people around this table were in the room, so this is partly an update for the executive team and partly an update for anybody listening to show that we do take these matters very seriously. But I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, or indeed if any of my colleagues wish to add anything. Looks like not. Okay, thank you very much. So we have some minutes of the previous meeting in the pack. They were circulated some time ago to members of the committee, to members of the board. Any comments on them, or can we take them as a true and fair view of what was agreed? Approved. Thank you very much indeed. We have, as good practice, an action log which shows status, including highlighted as blue matters that we propose to close as being dealt with. I just want to pick up on a couple of these things. Item 1 was the question on job sharing. It's got the date completed as 29/11. I mean, actually, the question was, can we analyse this? And the answer is we don't have all the data, but there will be a commitment that we'll have it in the future. So it's not true to say we have it today, but I would suggest if colleagues agree, we regard it as closed on the grounds that actions have been taken so that we can capture that and it will be included in future reports. On the corporate performance reporting, there was a request that the future reporting should not use terms like monitoring and on hold. I think a number of changes have been made. Chris, thank you for that. But on the other hand, we did, when we discussed it earlier, point out there are still some terms that could be better explained. So again, if colleagues don't mind, I would regard it as closed, but we got the message. But I think this meeting will capture in the minutes a few further things that are required. And then item 5, the Pulse survey results. It was said we'd agree the board would be presented with the opportunity to comment on the values refresh, and that would be today. We haven't really discussed the values refresh in any great detail, but we have talked about some of the programmes. But Kate, I don't know if you wish to add anything.
Just very briefly, we talked earlier this afternoon in the People Update about our intention to do more work around culture and to bring together the various activities that's been happening in the organisation with a kind of coherent plan around our values and the behaviours associated with that. I think maybe this action is just a little premature. I think the conversations we started with our NEDs and as an exec team will carry on in the next couple of months, as will the conversations into the organisation. So this agenda item isn't going away, and we will work with Secretariat to plot a time, probably in spring, where we will come back and give an update to board on that.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Ian.
Just a minor point in action one. I think that should read the interim deputy chief executive, not chief executive. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you, Ian. I think that deals with the formal board agenda, but I should just ask, is there any other business that people wanted to raise? Okay, well, look, thank you very much indeed, colleagues. That closes the formal meeting and concludes the minutes. We'll stop there. But as often happens, we do invite questions from the public, and we do have 3 this time. And I believe, Joyce, you're expecting one on Tyson. I was going to ask to deal with a couple. So the first question was, how is CQC reviewing their use of the terms safe, effective, caring, responsive and well-led in inspection? So could I ask you to speak first? I don't know if any colleagues wish to then add.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Those are our 5 key questions, and they describe the quality, which is a key element of our strategy. When we engaged in our strategy, we had high support from providers, stakeholders, people who use services and the public, that we should keep the 5 key questions, and they are a common language, a definition for quality across health and social care services. But in the rollout of the single assessment framework, and we talked earlier about it's going live with our early adopters this month, we have looked at the 5 key questions, and I'll just go through where perhaps there may be some changes. They have remained, but we did a lot of work with people who use services as to what lies beneath them in our quality statements. So under SAFE, there is a stronger emphasis on learning. Lots of best practice, lots of research, lots of our assessment demonstrates that there is, yes, an element of compliance with safety, but learning through safety, and learning is one of the things that can promote higher safety standards. Under effective, there is a stronger emphasis around how teams work together to produce better outcomes for people. And under caring, we are describing more about compassionate care in the moment for people, and also revise to make clearer links with our human rights and healthcare principles, especially fairness, dignity, respect, autonomy and equality. Under responsive, we want a stronger emphasis of how services and systems are built around people, including equity of access and equity of experience and outcomes. And under well-led, there is a stronger emphasis on the role of leadership, freedom to speak up, innovation and improvement, and workforce equality. We engaged on the framework as well, and we had strong support across health and social care services in that development of the framework. And as I said, we were going to be using the 5 key questions and the quality statements in the rollout of our single assessment framework. The framework is also applied to our local authority and ICS assessments, where we use a subset of quality statements. And then this does mean for the first time that the 5 key questions covers the whole health and social care system in terms of our assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joyce. And I want to detail, but a couple of points to emphasise to the question of how we're reviewing. It's a combination of our own experience and expertise, but importantly, working with providers as well. So thank you for that. The other question is about availability of how we assess things. So Tyson, I'm going to ask you to pick this up if I could. The question was, how does CQC assess the availability of hospital consultants to respond to emergencies out of hours?
Thank you for the question. During on-site inspections, we assess medical staffing under the SAFE key line of inquiry, subheading medical staffing. This includes evaluating whether there are consultant-grade staff with the appropriate specialism on call and available to reach the appropriate department within 30 minutes. In addition to assessing the availability of consultant-grade staff, we also evaluate the wider team mix. This is to assess whether trusts are deploying safe levels of staff cover more broadly. Outside of the inspection process, we monitor any potential concerns received, such as information shared via Give Feedback on Care. This would be triangulated with other information and followed up with organisations by the operational teams.
Thank you very much, Tyson. And then a third question I think probably is also best for you to pick up, and that it's probably in two parts. So the question was, how do we CQC regulate the way in which NHS bodies, so that would include hospitals and GP surgeries, change their IT systems to ensure that patients and staff can use the systems with confidence? And I say you may want to answer it separately for hospitals and GPs.
Thank you. I'll roll them together if that's okay. And it's probably worth saying at the top that we don't regulate the procurement of change of IT systems. What we want to know is if an IT system supports and improves the standard of care in an organisation, and also whether the organisation undertake the assurance and audit they need to do to ensure that the IT systems are safe. In terms of hospitals, we assess this under the well-led key question, particularly the prompt, are information technology systems used effectively to monitor and improve the quality of care? And that assessment takes place both at a service and at a corporate level, as well as interviewing senior leaders, such as the senior IT lead for the Trust. And during interviews with the executive team, we will also want to discuss the digital strategy. And in terms of general practice, there are two relevant questions where we would cover the IT strategy. Under responsive, for example, we would want to know how technology is used to support timely access to care and treatment. And under well-led, for example, we would ask, are people's views and experiences gathered and acted on to shape and improve the services and culture? Does this include people in a range of equality groups? Thank you.
Okay, Tyson, thanks very much. Unless I missed something, I think it was only the three questions, so thanks to my executive colleagues for that. So that does bring us to the end. So for those of you listening or watching us, thank you very much indeed. We will see you again in 2 months' time. Thank you to my colleagues. Safe journey home. Thanks.